Korea is divided into two nations. People are free to dare to cross the one line that divided Korea into two nations and is thought to be inviolable. The 38 Paralle Line is what the line is known as. The Korean Peninsula center is where the equator-based line that crosses 38 degrees is situated. The line indicated that South Korea is in the south and North Korea is in the north. But why is the line 38 degrees down? Who drew this line and why? Many people think that this line was established following the Korean War. However, the US drew the line on November 8, 1945, 5 years before the Korean War began. So from now on, we can learn about the Korean 38 Paralle Line. The US was informed at the end of World War II that Japan might unexpectedly submit and that the Soviet Union might advance to Korea. Actually, the US saw Korea as a war criminal nation that, like Japan, had to accept responsibility for the Pacific War. And actually, it is a contentious topic. There is no denying that Korea fought with Japan together in World War II. Korea was, however, Japan's colonial possession at the time. In addition, Japan passed the national mobilization law as the war dragged on, enabling it to steal a variety of goods from Korea. Additionally, Japan compelled Koreans to join the fight. While men were enlisted, women were either factory workers or sexual slaves in the Japanese military. Approximately 7 million Koreans were mobilized by Japan between 1939 and 1945. Particularly in the Japanese military, an estimated 140,000 women were victims of sexual slavery. The fact that the issue has not yet been resolved is the main cause of the strained ties between Korea and Japan. In any case, the US decided that Korea should bear some of the blame for the conflict with Japan, and created a division of occupied territory in the same way as the defeated country. The disarmament of the Japanese military in Korea was the state justification for the US traveling to Korea. There were numerous Japanese military in Korea at the time. Therefore, in the Korean peninsula, the US had to demand Japan's disarmament and submission. However, there is another reason to observe the Soviet Union. When it was reported that the Soviet Union would advance to Korea, it was assumed that Korea would fall under its sphere of influence. To prevent the Soviet Union from annexing Korea, the US drew the line urgently. The 38 Paralle Line is what it is called. How to draw the line has been the subject of many debates, but the most credible claim was that after examining the world map on the wall for 10 seconds, Charles Hotwell still served, a US military commander, and Dean Lusk, a former US Secretary of State, drew a line in the middle. The line must cross the middle, where the two biggest bases, Seoul and Incheon, are located, which is why it is at 38 degrees. Korea's capital is Seoul, and Incheon serves as both the harbor and a prison for US service members. This statement was readily accepted by the Soviet Union. As a result, based on the 38 Paralle Line, the US and the Soviet Union began to exert influence over Korea. In the southern portion of the 38 Paralle Line, American General Douglas MacArthur established the United States Army military government in Korea and declared the US military would have complete power to rule Korea. As soon as the US and Soviet Union arrived in Korea, they regarded the 38 line as a demarcation for non-aggression. Everything was not free to come and go, including air traffic and people. Unlike today, it is not impossible to cross the line, but it is obvious that there are many barriers in the way. In a few instances, the Soviet Union either killed border crossers from South Korea or pillaged the area. The southern line particularly hurt the peasants who lived close to the border. However, in order to cultivate and harvest land on the other side of the 38 Paralle Line, peasants have long admitted to putting their lives in danger by doing so. They were frequently denied access to harvest rice, imprisoned in refugee camps, or sent back to their native countries. The biggest issue was that no one was certain of the precise location of the 38 Paralle Line. Even the countries that drew the line, the United States and the Soviet Union, did not agree on its precise location. 12 rivers, more than 75 streams, and 101 minor peaks are divided by the 38 Paralle. Naturally, this led to a lot of conflict and disagreement based on the 38 Paralle. 화장리 화성면 연백군의 경기도 are a few examples of the representative villages. They believed they were in North Korea, but they noticed a line crossing the middle of the village when they carefully examined the map. The village was split into South and North Korea, despite the villagers' wishes to become a part of South Korea. The villagers were astounded by this circumstance. However, later, a Korean official showed up and changed the village's 38 line sign to designate it as a North Korean territory. So the Soviet Union and the United States conducted several fact-finding surveys to precisely define the 38 Paralle as these issues persisted. Even though it was done correctly, and even if the signs were placed by defining the area to be coverted, the Soviet Union and the United States would move them covertly and without the consent of anyone else. No one could therefore pinpoint the precise location of the 38 Paralle. In the middle of 1947, the conflict along the 38 Paralle started to take a political dimension. From 1948 on, it was a conflict between the two Koreans rather than between the United States and the Soviet Union. So thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to click the subscribe and the like button.